Welcome to Leadership Reimagined. I'm your host, Cassie Crosby. Today, I'm excited to welcome Andrew Mitchell, co-founder and president of Northlight AI, a company that delivers practical tools that drive real-world results. There's been a lot of talk in the news lately about what some of the big AI companies are doing, but we don't hear as much about what's going on in the startup space. So I wanted to bring Andrew on because he's doing some incredible work, making a huge impact, and he's doing it in a way that's both ethical and responsible. So I'm excited to talk about some of what he has going on, how it's impacting the community, and what he's learning along the way. So Andrew, it's so good to have you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Cassie.
Yeah, I'm excited for the conversation.
You as well.
Yeah. So to get started, it's worth noting that your background is somewhat unique. When you hear about someone who's running an AI company or working even in technology. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started in AI, and then how you got where you are today?
For sure. Yeah, it's certainly not the traditional tech path. In fact, if you told me even 5 years ago that I'd be involved in technology and AI, I probably wouldn't have believed you fully. So my background is I'm actually a writer by trade. That's what I did my master's degree in. I started a literary magazine that published fiction and essays and poetry really from around the world. Writing is my passion. That's how I think. I think through writing. I think through that process of all those little decisions you have to make as you're composing something. And so honestly, I'd say, if I'm being truthful, I first got pulled into AI almost from a place of fear or concern, because you start hearing all of this news about AI is going to replace X amount of jobs, it's going to replace writers, it's going to replace artists. And so my reaction to that sort of thing is to learn as much as I can about it and sort of get a sense of how much truth or validity there is to that. So that's probably how I first got pulled in. But prior to starting Northlight, I was working at the University of New Hampshire at the Center for Business Analytics. And so we worked with a lot of small businesses we were essentially a consulting agency with students and with faculty. And as you know, small businesses, they face a whole bunch of hurdles. It's incredibly difficult to implement technology efficiently for small businesses. And what I started to find, the more I learned and started working with AI, is that I really feel like it could be a equalizer of sorts, where suddenly small businesses have access to tools that 10 years ago they would have never dreamed of having access to. And so I really dived in, spent a lot of time learning. Flash forward a few years and here I am with Northlight AI.
Yeah. Wow. So we have that in common, our English background. So it's super interesting. And I remember you telling me when we first met, how did you say it about, English majors, right, being kind of the future of the world. Yeah. And what did you mean by that?
Well, I saw an article, I think it might have been in the New York Times or somewhere else, but it's clickbait in a way. They want you to click on it, but it said English majors will rule the world. And I think what's potentially truthful about that is English majors or writers or liberal arts thinkers have sort of been trained to think across disciplines, to really think in story and narrative, how you frame narrative, how you frame story. And so it's AI is necessitating workers who are creative. No longer is it just, here's your widget, this is all you do, and that's it. To succeed in AI now, you really need to be able to think creatively and across different spectrums. And so I think that's why English majors are doing well and will continue to do well. My concern, though, of course, and I think we talked about this too briefly, is that there's so much skepticism from that side of things, from English majors, from liberal arts majors, who have the same concerns I have, and frankly, the same concerns I still have. So my thought is the more we can get them involved, that's how we're going to make this technology really work.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to get into those concerns a little bit, but first I want to ask you about Northlight AI, just to provide some context for everyone. So what is Northlight AI? What are you working on currently?
Yeah, so Northlight AI is effectively a consulting agency and a training and development agency. So what we do is we learned early on that if these small businesses, if these even medium-sized businesses want to adapt to technology or understand AI, they need to be trained. There needs to be a process behind that. You can't just sort of jam it in. And so a lot of what we're doing is not reinventing the wheel, so to speak. hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on creating these brand new novel tools. For us, a lot of what we're doing is how do we put these tools in the hands of our clients and small businesses so that they can use them, but also learn how they play a part in the bigger picture of their operations. I think the most common response I get when people hear I'm in AI, well, there's two. It's either I'm terrified, that's
Yeah.
probably the most common, or the other one is I wouldn't know where to start. That's kind of where we start with addressing and working with our clients and partners.
Yeah. And it can be pretty intimidating. I know the thing I hear a lot from people is it's creepy. It sort of surprises people when it's able to analyze data and come up with something that's somewhat accurate.
It's funny. I did a separate podcast with the New Hampshire Children's Trust, and the premise of that podcast, this was about 6 months ago, but they actually had, I created an AI version of myself, my voice, and had it answer the questions in this podcast for the first half. And then the big reveal is, that wasn't actually Andrew, that was just AI. And it's very creepy in many ways, especially when you think how people may use it or want to use it, or really how people are
Yeah.
using it already. So yeah, it's I think probably one thing that people are surprised to hear from me is that I'm actually very skeptical in a lot of ways of AI.
Yeah.
Uh, and my joke with that is that it's kind of, I know it kind of sounds like you ever watch those ghost hunting shows or see those ghost hunting
Mm.
shows where you'll have somebody say, I'm the biggest skeptic in the world, but no, you're not. You spent $100,000 on ghost hunting.
Right.
Um, so I recognize that sounds a little off, but what I mean by that is I think there's a lot of places where AI can do a lot of good, and I think there's a lot of places where it can do a lot of harm. And I think one of the biggest challenges with AI proponents right now is they're glossing over some of the harm. I mean, to
Hmm.
say right now that AI won't replace people or replace certain jobs, it's already doing that.
Right. We're already seeing it.
Exactly. So it's very disingenuous to come at it from that angle. And honestly, I think that's one of the barriers to adoption. If you feel like as a small business owner, you're getting sold a bill of goods, so to speak, or just hearing what you want to hear, why would you dive into that? There needs to be that trust
Well,
upfront.
there are some advantages though, or you wouldn't be doing this. And you mentioned it's sort of being like a force multiplier for business or allowing small businesses to do things that heretofore they were unable to do due to resource constraints or, what have you. But
Right.
what do you see as the real value to small businesses and to startups?
That's a great question. I think everybody talks about the content creation piece of it. I read somewhere today, everything jumbles around in my mind, but the real power is in curation. The way AI helps us curate vast amounts of data or information at scale to use in our day-to-day lives. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're a social media manager for a company. If you really think about the work you're doing, so much of that is actually not work involved with social media. It's just trying to build the infrastructure or the systems in place so that you can eventually get to the social media. What kind of posts do we want to do? How do we want to do it? I have to call up a video content creator to come in and film XYZ, all these different moving parts. Where AI really excels, I think, is bringing everything together in the same virtual room so you can just focus on your work, which is, what is my mission? It's to reach this audience, and this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to brainstorm with ChatGPT or with any of these large language models to do that more efficiently. We did a project for a company, and the project was really around automating a lot of Excel work. And
Mhm.
this terrified their main Excel person, main worker, because she estimated she was spending about 40 hours a month normalizing data. She was worried, am I going to get replaced or what's going to happen there? But what she found is once we automated that 40 hours or whatever, I mean, imagine having that 40 hours back to
Right.
focus on your real job, which is talking with customers or working with customers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
That's
Or
the power.
making meaning of the data, making
Making
decisions
meaning.
with the
Yeah,
data.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So much for small businesses, just because small businesses, they don't have an entire marketing team. They don't have an entire analytics team. AI won't give you that, but it can get you closer than ever before.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You mentioned concerns earlier. What are your biggest concerns? Like when you're going into a company to work with someone who's just getting started, what are some of those things that get your hair raised on the back of your neck?
Yeah, I would say right up front, really getting a sense of why they're interested in AI. There can be some
Mm,
concerns around that. I really don't believe you can just hire somebody to come in and replace your workers, but that is happening. And for some people, that's the goal, right? Is just, I want
yeah,
to automate everything so that I can have lower costs. To me, that's a red flag just because it shows there's not a lot of um, forward vision or strategic thought around that. It's very almost like reactionary. I
yeah,
should use AI because I should use AI. That doesn't make sense. So that's a concern. And I think another piece is people who come in too confident or can sort of frame themselves as experts in this space and are really unwilling to listen to some of the issues that could come up or problems that could arise. They're more looking for somebody to just say, good job, you're doing everything great, keep going. And that's something that worries us often.
yeah. And I think expertise in this space is a little bit mm, ill-defined as well. I mean,
Right.
everything I read, my understanding is that most people, even those who work closely with it, don't necessarily fully understand how it works, why it works, what the, ultimate end state of all of this is. And so I think that makes sense that that's a huge concern.
Right. In fact, I saw
Yeah.
Sam Altman at a conference. He's the co-founder or I guess the chief executive officer of OpenAI.
Yeah.
And somebody asked him a question about, how is AI coming up with these answers? And even he said, I'm not fully sure. I don't,
Right.
that's that black box problem of how do you, if you can't source where the information's coming from fully, how do you trust it or how do you run with it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I did a lot of work in the strategizing space of AI back in 2017, 2018, and really just looking at the implications of AI on national defense. But what I learned then was how absolutely critical having clean data is to having, reasonable AI outputs, logical AI outputs. Quality of data in equals quality of answers out. We all know that to be true. And so that's, when I think about companies trying to adopt AI, right? I think, okay, well, do you have your arms around your data? Or is it able to like talk to each other? Or, can you make sense of it in some kind of consolidated way?
Right, exactly. And at the end of the day, is it even an AI challenge or is it just
Right.
a data management challenge or a sort of automation RPA challenge, something like that? Sometimes people want to over engineer an AI solution for something that doesn't actually require it. Um,
Yeah. It's the old like it can be done, but should it be done?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Is it
Yeah.
ultimately helpful to you? Is it actually serving a purpose? For me, it always ties back to what is my goal? And then you sort of work backwards from there. So if my goal, for example, is to educate potential customers on what Northlight does, I need to work backwards from there and figure out what systems are in place to help me educate those customers. That's going to include a lot of human interaction, but it may
Mm.
also include, for example, a 24/7 chatbot that can respond in 100 languages to basic questions people might have so that when they go to ask questions, they're not stuck waiting for an answer or an email for 48 hours or 72 hours or something like that. So it's a mix.
Do you think we're there yet, though, where companies, because I do see that happening, where companies are turning over some of this customer facing operations to AI chatbots? My understanding is that, actually it's degrading customer service. People aren't getting the answers they want. And again, I think it comes back to like properly training the system to know what to answer, to know how to solve problems for people. And human problems are complex. And so, we can't fully account for all of the problems that come up.
Well, for sure. And I think that's definitely the case. I would say that's probably the majority of the case. Where I think it's a little different with what we try to do is, first of all, just be upfront that this is AI. Some people are trying to
Yeah.
hide behind it's actually a person or it's AI. So, to kind of give you a case study of where I think it's successful, we were working with a higher education partner and all of their admissions advisors, I mean, 90% of the questions they were getting from prospective students were the same, right?
Mhm.
When's the deadline to apply? What's the tuition cost, et cetera? And so if 90% of those questions are the same, What if we can offload those to a chatbot that has a superhuman memory so that with that freed up time, you can focus more on specific problems that those complicated problems that your students or prospective students are facing. So rather than treat almost every problem the same or every question as the same, why don't we immediately help the people that need that in-person human interaction? But for some people, if I just want to know when the application deadline is, I'm fine to go on a website and get it in 5 seconds as opposed to calling or scheduling a meeting around my workday. So again, I think it goes back into why are we doing this? It can't just be for the novelty of it. We can't just
Right.
AI for customer service because it's novel and cool. It does degrade the experience. But if you think about it, how can we use this to make human interaction better or more powerful? That's where I think it can go well.
Yeah, yeah. And as we've established, even some of the biggest names in AI don't necessarily fully understand how these systems work. So how do you, as a, small business, how do you stay up to date on what's happening, what's changing, how the technology is shifting?
Uh, the totally honest answer is I don't. It's impossible to keep up 100% with how much stuff is moving.
Yeah.
There are literally hundreds of new AI tools being released daily. And I do think we're probably in a bubble where that's going to pop eventually. But
Yeah.
I think it's actually detrimental to try to know everything as opposed to carving out your core competencies, your core skill sets, and really diving in deep there. One of the things that I think makes Northlight AI work well is that my co-founders and my team, we have very different skills and backgrounds. One of my co-founders is a professor of data science at the University of New Hampshire, very technical, very data-driven, brilliant in that way. Another one of my colleagues is he actually entrepreneur long before he came to Northlight, very good at that face-to-face business development, leadership, operations, that sort of thing. And so I don't try to know it all. We try to like split between us where we can go. And there's sometimes where we just have to tell people we can't help here
Yeah.
because the last thing I want to do is overpromise and underdeliver or create, a problem for the business because I thought, you know what, I'll just do it. I can do it. You have
Yeah.
to be realistic too.
Yeah. And I feel like we're starting to touch on a little bit of the ethics around the application of AI. And, there just seems to be a lack of regulation in this space or even an unwillingness to regulate. And so how do you think about that?
It's a good question. I mean, I think one of the challenges is the bigger picture around AI is that essentially it's an arms race, which means
Yeah.
regulation, whether I think it's needed or not, is going to be hard to come by because you have the United States, you have all these other countries, they want to become the powerful AI, superpower. And so
Mhm.
um, that makes it very difficult to have any meaningful regulation. Part of the issue too is that elected officials don't know much about the technology, so they can be sort of easily guided in one direction or the other based on sort of big tech's, yeah,
Yeah.
just do this, just do that. So, we try to solve the problems that we can solve. We sweep in front of our door rather than try to clean the whole
Yeah.
lawn, so to speak, and really thinking about, for our particular client or for our particular use case, how do we do this responsibly and ethically so that workers, at the end of the day, employees feel like they have more agency, more autonomy over their work, and more connection and purpose with what they're doing.
Yeah. I can't help but think of social media as a parallel where like social media exploded onto the scene, everybody adopts it, and then it's now 20 years later, we're all going, whoa, like this had massive societal implications on humans, on children, adults. So, I just wonder, without sort of keeping our hand on the beat of what's happening, like how do we make sure that we end up in a place where we want to be rather than in some place that you know, we had no idea where we were going to enter.
Right. I think that's a huge conundrum because it,
Yeah.
it does have so many massive ramifications globally too. So I I try to spend at least an hour or two every day learning about some of the emerging trends or issues that are coming up. But, for example, it changes so quickly. Google
Yeah.
recently announced that they've opened up their AI infrastructure for defense and for war. And there are some ethical questions around that, regardless of where you are politically or any of that.
Yeah.
They went from, no, we're not going to use it for this to, yes, we are going to use it for this. And that change just suddenly happens. So that's again, it sounds kind of corny, but that's why I think we need more of these liberal arts thinkers to make some connections that aren't necessarily explicitly programmed into the immediate, this is what we're doing right now. Where
Yeah.
does this technology lead to? How does it lead there? Are there historical parallels? I have some deep concerns around that whole piece of things.
I think it's wise to approach it in that way, to approach it carefully and to be thoughtful about it. I just don't think we have any other choice. And so, in your day to day, as you're working with this and working with companies, what are some of the toughest challenges you're facing?
It's, I would say, getting the ball rolling in a meaningful way, because it's very easy to start working with AI sort of superficially and from a place of total fear, where, yes, I'm willing to explore and try this out while there's consultants in the room with me or experts in the room with me. But a lot of leadership still has this thing with, hyper control. And for AI to work at an organizational level, you need to give people room within reason to experiment, to fail, to just play around with the technology. And that requires some basic governance. What kind of information will we feed to AI? What information will we not feed to AI? But it really does become hard to make a dent at the organizational level. You can make progress often with one or two people, but then how do you spread it? And so for us, it's what we try to do is we try to create those champions within the organization. We are honest.
Mhm.
You may
Yeah.
not be able to restructure an entire multinational corporation or whatever just based on your learning with AI, nor should you. But what you can do is sort of be a champion and find some basic safe use cases that make your life easier and that you could share with colleagues, et cetera, et cetera.
It sounds like some of what we're talking about is risk tolerance. And
Yeah,
and like if you're going to step into the AI space, there is a level of risk tolerance that, right, to be effective that you kind of have to accept. It's higher risk based on everything we've talked about.
exactly. I mean, it certainly is higher risk, especially as
Yeah.
we've alluded to a few times when even the experts don't know everything related to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
So we've talked a bit about challenges, concerns, problems, but there's also a ton of opportunity in AI. And so where are you seeing the biggest opportunities, either for yourself or for other companies?
I really believe it's in this small to mid-size space. So Sam Altman, again, he had a quote, something along the lines of the first one-person billion-dollar company will be built because of AI. And
Wow.
really thinking, what does that mean? It means that with all the automation, the tools that are available, the billions of dollars worth of technology that you can get for 19.95 a month in some cases, people are going to be more empowered ever to take control over their work and to take control over their destiny. So I think it's a great time to consider starting a business. If in the old days as an entrepreneur, you had to kind of be a master of everything. Now I think, for example, marketing, that's not my thing. I
Mm.
still need a really good marketing person to steer strategy. But what I can do is I can create basic content, videos, those sorts of things that I never would have been able to do. I created an avatar of myself. So it looks like me, it sounds like me. What's nice is I can create videos at scale like I would write in a Word document. My avatar
Yeah.
is there. So I just put in the text and I get myself to reach more people more efficiently. A video that might have taken me 100 hours if I ever did it at all now takes me in some cases 5 minutes. Those are the things that I think are the biggest opportunities as small businesses to really take some of the stress off a little bit and have sort of these digital experts. I don't even want to call them experts, but digital assistants help you with what your job is and your task is. Curating some of that knowledge so you don't have to sift through
Yeah.
billions of emails or what have you.
Yeah. I think what I'm seeing, though, both in what I do and a lot of the networking I do with other coaches, is that when AI is overused, there's an authenticity issue,
Yes.
right? Like people don't necessarily connect with fully automated AI content, but there's maybe a hybrid option where it does still require some of that individual effort, but that you can maintain some of that authenticity.
Well, everybody can taste that it has a flavor, right? AI generated text,
Yes.
especially on LinkedIn. I saw some absurd statistic. I may be making up the exact number, but it was something like 60% of content was AI generated. So you're just flooding the market with just sort of the same tasting garbage. I joke too that I can always tell when something's written by AI if it starts in today's competitive digital landscape, because it seems like every large language model starts that way.
Yeah.
Your
Although
point,
I
though,
will say that's also how a lot of Army officers start white papers.
well, and
know?
honestly, that's part because it's trained on that. Now that there's so much of it, it's flooded the market, you can taste it. So
Yeah.
to your point, I think where people really struggle with ChatGPT and writing is when they input something, get a response, and they say, I'm done with it.
Right. Yeah.
That's going to produce really boring, tepid text most of the time. The power of AI comes when you iteratively work with it. And so I might, let's say I'm developing a marketing strategy for my social media at Northlight. I may have 40 or 50 different pieces of conversation with OpenAI or Claude or any of these before it's ready to deploy.
Yeah.
So again, I think that's where that authenticity piece really sticks out. People are using it just as filler. But again, what is the context? What is the need for this? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get people information? Are you trying to educate people? You got to think about that piece first before you just start flooding the airwaves with AI generated.
Yeah. Flooding the zone, as it were, and creating a bunch of extra noise, which actually may serve to water down your message rather than amplify it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Andrew, in 5 years, if you've been successful in what you're trying to accomplish here, what do you hope to be true?
I hope that I'm able to look at myself and genuinely think that I've made an impact in small to mid-sized businesses, especially in nonprofits. The way I see that is helping them get resources they never would have had access to before. The reality is, no matter who uses AI, there is a legitimate question. Is there any ethical use of AI at a fundamental level? I'm not sure there is at the end of the day. And so what I hope is that I can think of, okay, this technology is here. It's really taking over the scene. What impact can we make? Hopefully positive impact to empower small business owners like my own family, my parents who are in the restaurant industry. For example, right there, the AI can help in so many ways with even like something like the restaurant industry. Imagine being able to, as a business owner, a restaurant owner, use AI to write better descriptions for your meals or to better price your meals so that there's a higher profit margin so that you can succeed and thrive. There are all those use cases that I really want to get into. I guess that's my long-winded way of saying in 5 years, I'll feel successful if I'm making a living, helping other people make a living. And I don't say that just in an altruistic way. I, of course, to make my money and help my kids and do all of that stuff. But if I'm going to be in the space, I want to empower people to use this technology because it's done a lot for me already. And I think it can do a lot for others.
Yeah, that's awesome, Andrew. And if people want to follow you, where can they find you?
So our website is northlightai.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Mitchell, 2 L's in Mitchell. Those are probably the best places. You can email me directly too, andrew@northlightai.com. Always happy to talk and chat.
Yeah, I can tell just from the conversation we had today. And I just want to thank you again for coming on and having this conversation. I'm excited to continue to watch the work you're doing and see what you guys accomplish.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking
Yeah.
forward to talking more as well.
Yeah, likewise.